Hey, welcome back to Stories with Dave. Isn't it great fun? Come on in. I'm going to try to sit down slowly enough for this camera to hang on to me. Oh, no. Sorry, Ozbot. Another fail. See if we can make Ozbot fail again. Yep. Hey, Ozbot. Darren here, pal. Yeah. Ain't happening. What a joy. What a joy. Welcome back to Stories with Dave, your low rent, low entertainment value, storytelling venue where you get to hear stories read by the author. Is that a great word? Author? I was always of the mind that to be an author, you had to have published at least 10 novels of merit and note, or at least be dead, you know? Um, Now everyone's an author. That's fine. I'm not. I've never been able to call myself that. I've written 5 books, none of which is worth anything, none of which will ever sell any copy. I think they're decent, but we just don't live in that world. Decent doesn't get a shot, and great gets a shot only if you already have a name. Otherwise, you better be writing to the narrative, or you're not going to publish. Sounds like a gripe. It's not. I could care less, man. I'm done with this world. Let's see here if I can get this in focus. This is the premiere issue, like it says, of Java Monthly magazine, published in Tempe, Arizona. Let me see if I can get the. Jesus, the guy. Would you look at the font on this shit? I remember the staff meeting following this. When this guy came in, he was a young artist that they had hired, and this was his font, his proprietary font. Okay. And I got this call on the phone, this apologetic, the story's out. This is my first published piece, um, in any form, for public consumption. And it was interesting how I got the job. I would you fucking track, man, or what? I answered an ad for assistant manager at Goodwill on Baseline in Tempe. And there was this really nice lady named Gertie Miles who was doing the interviews for HR. And I had designed, this is in what, 93? And I designed my resume in PageMaker, and I made it look like Windows, so it was dropped down. And printed it up like that. It was pretty cool. It was pretty innovative. And it caught her eye. She said, you're obviously really creative, and I don't really feel right hiring you for a job at Goodwill because it's really not where you need to be, but why don't we go ahead and put you here as a stopgap? This is a true story. So I'll hire you right now, because you need a job. But I also want to introduce you to some friends of mine. Rob Centenary and Michelle Savoy were starting a magazine in Tempe called Java Monthly, and they need talent, And she sent me from that interview at Goodwill Industries, hired me, and then I drove from there over to Java Monthly and met Robert and Michelle. And they wanted to see what I had, and I had a story idea about. Or no, they did. No, I did. It was a story. No, they did. Yeah, they had the story. It was a coffee supplier for I think it was Scottsdale Coffee Roasters in Scottsdale. There were, believe it or not, in Phoenix in 1993 there were 3 or 4 micro roasting operations in Phoenix, Arizona. Go figure. And the coffee thing was really, kind of at its zenith in the Northwest. I wrote a piece about that that'll be coming up in this series called "Roasting the Great Northwest Myth." Um, but Yeah, so she sent me over there, and they said, "Hey, what do you got?" And I said, I'm writing kind of a Gonzo style. I was a kid. I was trying to be, God help me, Hunter Thompson, and oh my Lord, look at this. This is just terrible. They've got, yeah, I remember she called and just um, let you get a close up. This is what the you know copy looked like. It had this weird scribbles across it, and this kid was really pleased with himself. He thought it was just so artistic. See, we got, if you could, True South in Search of Mexico's Magic Bean by David Vandevelder. A good cup of coffee should take you there. Prophetic words from a prophetic man, John Black, an old family friend from mission days in La Paz, Cuernavaca, Mexico City. But he wasn't trying to be prophetic. He was talking about the taste. Hold on. Yeah, he was talking about the taste. Got to get an overhead. That was longer ago than I care to remember. The memory, like most of my memories from True South, is part of a postcard image of the deep marble swimming pool behind our house in Cuernavaca, and tall tales that few of us believed even then. John Black is dead now. God came for him early. You can't just be a priest, live the kind of life he did, and expect the Lord to ignore you for very long. Ask any member of the Swaggart family. But that is done. I could write tomes about John Black, but at this moment, what's important is his legacy. What he taught me about True South, and what he taught me about how to enjoy a cup of coffee. Coffee, he said, is the only way to taste the earth. Close your eyes and drink. You should taste trade winds through forests of ebony. It's centuries-old jungle loam sweetened by smuggler's blood and papaya blossoms. If you don't taste these things, the coffee is no good. Yo creo que es verdad. I've heard these words again and again, speaking up to me from cups of weak coffee taken by necessity at places like Circle K and Quick Stop. And I've thought at times, connecting coffee as I do to the church and its stranger servants I have met in the mission field, that to drink such coffee is a blasphemy, a renunciation of all that's good and natural in the world. Weak coffee is like something strained from the sludge of the Gilbert Canal. It reminds you exclusively of bad times, of morning streets and strange cities when the hangover is too much and you can't find anyone who speaks English well enough to direct you to some aspirin. Weak coffee is actually complemented by the taste of the styrofoam it comes in. Think about it. Then you gotta flip it upside down. Isn't that nifty? The coffee we drank at John's Black House is what we refer to in Appalachia as the real McCoy. In Cuernavaca, it's the real Gonzales, but it's the same damn thing. God, what a racist. It was local product, picked in country, and it was unwashed. It means that it was never sent to processing plant to be tamed and robbed of its true spirit, as most coffee is. Beans were black and slippery with oil. Your hands smelled like coffee tar weeks after you handled it. And a thimbleful of that stuff got you wired enough to walk all the way to Chichen Itza, John said. Washing coffee keeps us from being in a state of true grace in the eyes of the maker. It alters the basic recipe. His recipe. That, my young friend, is dangerous moral ground on which to tread. It's worse than genetic engineering. It was a long time before I tasted coffee like that again. I had a cup of Turkish coffee in Tel Aviv that came pretty close in terms of taste. The hot raw cacao in the southern Philippines had every bit of the punch of John's coffee, along with other narcotic effects you can't get in coffee at any price. But that stuff is worthy of a story all its own. I never searched for it either, half believing as the years drew past my memories of it were fictional constructs based on suggestion and on dreams, perceived as reality. Therefore, I never found it. It found me. I was working in Phoenix at a restaurant owned by a family whose antics made the Bush administration look like a high school magic club. Oh no. I helped them open their place, and I worked like a dog for them for months. I made cappuccino and mochas and double hazelnut caramel mochas and triple decaf espressos for the local would-be Eurotrash yuppies, the half-bright Midwestern professionals who seemed to keep coming endlessly down I-17 from places like Minnesota and Wisconsin, fouling the environment with their shyster Reagan-era wisdom. It was a nice job as jobs go, but it paid only enough to allow the owners of the excessive lifestyles to which they had become accustomed. Finally, I had to tell them to fuck off in the most inspiring, in the most surprising and uncomfortable way that I could, and at the worst possible time. But before I did, I was able to see the bean, the Mexican jumping bean, in all of its glory, and to drink dangerous quantities of it in memory of that old friend who taught me so much about life and coffee. And that's where the story should end, right there, with a comfortable memory bringing everything full circle. But one of the first things you learn in the business of writing is that it never ends. Not really. There's the Hunter Thompson, right? It never ends, not really. There are rest stops. Here it is. Places to park and breathe the air and take assessments. Brief moments of stasis on the road of life. But eventually the sun goes down. The horrors start scratching at your windshield. And it's time to go. My friends at the coffee roasters in Arizona, a reputable source on coffee, tell me that the bean, which they call copulin, is brought up over the border by a gnarled old man driving a school bus that might have once belonged to Ken Kesey. The coffee is grown beside a marijuana plantation somewhere in the Yucatan, and no one can say for sure what effect, if any, that has on the potency of either. That is the first in a long list of questions I'll have for the old man when I meet him. He will know. He's the wanderer from the prophecy, the second seer, the messenger implied in the message. He will have the answers to many things. The border is the worst possible place to drive around asking a bunch of questions in high-speed combat Spanglish. Especially if those questions pertain to an individual who makes his living driving things northward. Smugglers are angels down there, pillars of the community, and every proud mother wants a smuggler as well as a priest in the family. I voiced these concerns to an old associate and fellow traveler who is still back in D.C. in Mount Pleasant, where reasons why are almost as murky as there are toward the border. He agreed wholeheartedly. Absolutely, man. The border would be suicide. They would sense the gravity of your mission. Exactly. And besides, Dave, the real color doesn't even start for a couple 100 miles south of the border. Steve had a point, but we'd have to see. There were still phone calls to make, and Ann at Coffee Roasters, for one. She alone, as far as I knew, had the particulars about the old man's schedule, his route, and his points of entry into the U.S. Steve said he would be out in 3 days with an interpreter, a man named Chris, with whom he had gone to school. The two had to be in Tucson at a wedding, after which they were going to rent something large with four-wheel drive and head for the canyon. Just for a couple days, Steve said. We'll be in Phoenix plenty of time to see the Cavaliers stomp Syracuse in the NCAAs. I'm bringing Chris. He's been teaching me Spanish, muy bien. I finally reached Ann about a week later, the morning of the day Steve and Chris were supposed to arrive. She had good news and bad news, and news that was just plain weird. And I asked her the truth about the school bus. You wouldn't believe it. Could have belonged to Ken Kesey. There's rainbow carpet on the ceiling. You mean he's some sort of Mexican hippie? Mexican? He's American as you are. You're kidding me. No, I'm not. His name's Daniel Fourwinds. How many Mexicans do you know with that kind of name? I couldn't say that I knew any. He's from San Francisco. He was a hairdresser in the 60s. He just sort of gravitated south and started smuggling. We've been handling his coffee for years, and we send it all over the place in the U.S. and even Tokyo. We're the only roaster handling it. It's unwashed, right? Exactly. There's more though. He lets the fruit dry on the he lets the fruit dry on the tree before he picks the beans. That's what makes it so sweet. He's got information about it. I think we have one around a pamphlet or something that he made around here somewhere. If you'd like to borrow it. Where does he actually live? I'm not positive to tell you the truth. I know to get to the plantation you have to drive about 70 miles in four-wheel drive. See, and it's user friendly too. It's really easy to read. Aha. It's in there. There's a lot of coffee and co-ops. Daniel said Daniel said there's a whole family structure around the people dealing in raw coffee down there. Just one big happy family. And told me some of what Daniel Forwinds had been through trying to make it in the coffee business in True South. He had seen his share of grim people, cocky tequila drunk federales, grim border guards with chiseled jaws, sunglasses, and awful breath, paranoid glue sniffing smugglers, thieves, corrupt politicians. Many and strange would be the entries in a Daniel Forwinds guest book were there one aboard the bus. He eventually bought the plantation from some people who gave him some water one day in the jungle. It's doing well, but it's still small. There are people down there who have tried to kill him for it. That came as a surprise. I've known other gringos who've tried to own a piece of True South and some of them succeeded, though it never came cheap. John Black, for instance, went so far as to have Bishop Saucedo, the Episcopal bishop, kidnapped and hauled into a little truck from Mexico City to the Cuernavaca jail, all to make a point about land ownership. Who was it? Was it the church? Who knows? Other landowners, maybe. We'll have to tell you that story. He'll have to tell you that story. I don't know many of the details. When is he due in? Well, we never knew that for sure. It's like that, you know, one month somebody's trying to kill him, another month he's on a journey somewhere in the jungle. We don't even know. We don't even know until we hear from him. He's due, though. Should be any time. Dan promised to call as soon as she had some word. It wouldn't be for another week, at least, probably two, which, as it turned out, was just as well. At least, it was just as well for us as an immediate plan was concerned. The next time I heard from Steve was a couple of hours after I had spoken with Ann. He was calling from somewhere in northern Arizona from a phone booth closest to where he and Chris had been arrested. He was a mess of nerves and he was deeply paranoid. It took him a while to tell the story, and I couldn't help noticing how much he sounded like Mayor Marion Barry on that fateful night so many years ago, just before his great African conversion and shocking re-entry into the politics of District 3. Steve, zero tolerance. Goddamn bitch, set me up. God damn it. The repetition, the utter disbelief, and the shaky, high-pitched voice are always the same, regardless of who it was that just had the carpet ripped out from under him. In the case of the mayor, it provided us with hours and hours of good TV, and it livened up what had been a relatively quiet year in terms of sensational DC news. In Steve's case, however, the humor was scant. We're getting the first plane out of here. And go where? Back to Mount Pleasant? Back to Berryville? Nonsense. The light and the space down here would do you some good. Besides, the game is on in 3 hours. You'll be able to make it if you start immediately. It was impossible to convince him, and I felt sorry that we were leaving the Southwest with that kind of taste in their mouths. But such it is with visits to fringe geography. The rules change, and it's easy to get burned, especially in the desert, beyond the fringe, where there are no rules, or at least not the kind we're used to. I thought about Daniel Forwinds and John Black and Bob Williams, Americans I've known who long ago drifted toward True South and never came back again. And I thought about how all of them had crossed a thin line beyond which they could never really be Americans again. There are sociologists who call it an adaptive measure. They'll show you charts, tables, and theses written by smart people who never set foot in another country. They made a big science out of it, long-term travel and the re-entry and the effects of it on the mind. They'll tell you that They'll tell you that acculturation is adaptive. But I have a feeling Daniel Forwinds, were he here to consult him, would put it in much simpler terms. He'd say that the breeze is good, and there's nothing quite like waking up to smell papaya blossoms in bloom. And he would say that he stayed because life down there, though precarious at times, is as simple and rich and sweet as and mysterious as a good strong cup of coffee. Yo creo que es verdad. Yeah. Yeah. Java Monthly Magazine, premier issue. You'll have to excuse that alarm. Sorry about that. I'm not gonna redo this. It's just not good enough. I'm having a gas reading this stuff though. I've got a bunch. I got a whole stack of these things. The other ones should be smoother. This was the last the last opportunity, I think. I can't remember whether they fired this artist, the graphic artist, or whether they just reined him in and made him change the font. I was so thrilled to have a story in print that I could care less. You couldn't. In retrospect, if you see things in terms of spiritual combat, I can look back and just laugh at this and go, yeah, this is par for course. My first published story, and it's the farthest thing from user friendly. It's really hard to read, and the way the font works just makes it, but interestingly enough, it's probably the only time in my life I'll ever hear the words, "Oh, you're David Vandevelder, the writer." And I heard that from the guy named Jim Schultz. I'll never forget his name. Who was a customer at the Coffee Palette where I was roast master, and I was roasting a batch, as I did constantly. And that's what you do as a roast master. But I was general manager too. I'll go into that more later as I talk more about coffee. Yeah, I was roasting a batch, and he came in and got to talking with me because we had a setup whereby we had a little bar set up around the roasting area so that you could sit and drink coffee there and talk to me, and I would, walk you through whatever I was doing, and share information with the customers about what was going on with the roast, how to roast coffee, and what the process is like. So you turned the roast house concept into kind of a little bit of a performance thing, which was cool. Obviously, I've got that gene. I'm not averse to being in the spotlight or whatever. So I enjoyed that, but it's strange because I wound up eventually. I lost that job. Because I complained to my editor at that magazine about what I was getting paid. After about a year of opening the shop and being more than 50% responsible for all the roast, and opening shop every day, managing the crew, doing the numbers and all that, essentially working as if it were my shop, but for $250 a week. And this is in 93. I figured, what the hell, I'm getting experience, I was really a sucker to do that, I think. But I've got these stories to tell. Isn't that priceless? Got that. So, I eventually, I'm looking at this young married couple with a family. They were resistant to wholesale their coffee. Here's an irony. Today, that's all they do is wholesale coffee. Their whole nut gets supported on wholesale. When I brought up the idea of wholesaling, it was all pushback. And I said, I don't know how you're going to afford payments on this machine. You know, roasting machine at Dietrich's or Probate or whatever brand is a, back then I remember equating it to a Beamer, like 5 Series, you know. You have to, you can't just nickel and dime espresso drinks to pay for that. You got to go out and start boogieing, you know. And these were geeks. These were nerds. She was this, you know, future victim, wannabe lesbian, art school reject from Cal Davis. Her old man was some heart attack victim from the theater program there. Oh my God! Like her spirit kind of gave birth to where we are today. Believe it or not. And he was just this insufferable dork, and they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have any swagger between the two of them and all their kin. He was this, you know, silver spoon from Los Angeles, and you know, this new money shithead who just, like all new money shitheads, pranced around like he was made of golden turds. So when I complained to my editor that, you know, I went out, I opened up, I got a Senza, which was a coffee house, famous coffee house in Mesa. They've been open, I think, they'd already been open for 20 years. I got them to change their house brand. I got them to switch to us. And when you're a coffee house and you're not making your own coffee, that kind of change can be catastrophic because you're a drug dealer and you've got your customers are addicts and they have a flavor and a feeling and an experience that they're looking for in their coffee. And it's just like any addict of any product. If you start, you know, they show up one day and you've got a different rock, you know, the flavor is a little lighter, it hits a little different, you're going to lose customers. So it's almost impossible to get customers like that on board. I got a Senza. I got a restaurant down in oh wow, what's that area just south of Mesa? Actually, no, the farmhouse I think is in Mesa too. It's a restaurant called the Farmhouse, which the first time I went there, I was just so blown away. This place is amazing. It's a farmhouse, you know, and it's an operating farm. But the farmhouse is like you're in at the Walton's house. So, you know, the line goes across the yard and it's impossible to get in there on a weekend morning. You know, I'm sure today it's just crazy. It was nuts back then. Everything is made from scratch. The eggs are all on premises. The meat is raised there. The marmalade, you know, it's phenomenal. And I went there with a girlfriend one morning, just phenomenally hungover, and was preaching their gospel from my seat and secured a informal meeting with F&B to just bring them a sample of my coffee, you know? And did it with just the sell, you know, like you guys are bloody amazing. I can't believe how good this restaurant is. I would love to roast your coffee. Please let me bring a sample by. That's all I ask. And they did, and I got that account too. But you know, that was interesting because I came into the shop and I was hushed by the wife owner. Shh, shh. Ron's on the phone with the farmhouse. And I said, whoa, what? I said, I was just down there earlier today. He's getting the account. You know? And I had just taken them the sample that afternoon. I said, yeah, I know. I took them the sample. Oh, well, just, shh. She finishes hushing me. So long story short, I didn't get a bonus for that. I didn't get a raise or for a Senza. And keep in mind, I did this all on my own. I went out after working 12-hour days and I packed up little sample packs of coffee and I took them out to architect's office, law firms. I took them everywhere I could. And uh, just tried to drum up business, but then eventually just got huevos and started going to actual cafes and saying, look, man, my coffee's better than yours is. Give it to test. So, yeah, I didn't get a bonus for that. I didn't, it would have meant a lot if they had just let me design the blend because they wanted to, that was my pitch to them was, I'll put together a house blend for you. And that's what I did for a Senza also. We'll do a proprietary house blend that's yours and it's a secret, blah, blah, blah. Only you will have the keys kind of deal. And I didn't get to take part in the creation of that blend either, which was nice. Spiritual warfare 101. So I had complained about that to my editor, who conveniently told the owners of the store they fired me. Yeah, that was my thanks. I'll probably tell the next chapter, the Echo Espresso chapter next time. You got to turn lemons into lemonade, right? And that's what I did. I actually went and worked for a better organization and became the Southwest representative for the La San Marco espresso machine company out of Trieste, and I worked with my dear friend and second father, Tony Floriani, at Echo Espresso. And, that's a whole other set of stories. It goes into different topic areas, and I'll see how I can weave that into these other stories. But thanks for joining me for Stories with Dave. It's fun and cool to tell these coffee stories. I look forward to telling some more of them. We've got plenty of these pieces, and some of them are pretty funny. I've got one called Japanese Blue Mountain, about Japanese control of Jamaican coffee. I've got one about the futures market, coffee futures in the Brazilian loop when jungles freeze. I've got one about roasting the Great Northwest myth. So yeah, I'm going to stay on this coffee topic for a while, and we'll just groove with that. And I will drop some little poems here and there in among that. I hope you enjoy. Have a great night. Peace.